we're going to be counting down the top 100 magic items in 5th edition D&D. These are all going to be basic items because taking into account every item from 5th edition would be kinda crazy. I haven't used or ran a game involving every item in the game. However, recently I have finally given out every single basic D&D magic item and am ready to give my thoughts on them. We're taking into account an item's overall power, alongside its rarity, how often you can use it in a game, and how fun it is to use. This is a list made up of my personal experiences, so if you think an item is too high or too low on the list, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, let's begin with item number 100. A lot of items just missed this list, but I think that it would be incomplete without the +1 weapon. This magic item is a foundational piece in Dungeons & Dragons. It's usually the first magic item that most parties get. The Dungeon Master's Guide recommends giving this type of item out about 5th level, which also coincides with the greatest jump in power that a player usually gets. By a certain level, every single player character should be rocking with at least one +1 magic item, whether that be a ranger and a bow, a fighter and a greatsword, or even a wizard with a small +1 dagger, just in case, for emergencies only. But seriously, it's hard to imagine a party of Dungeons & Dragons characters without this particular item. It is foundational, it is necessary, and therefore it is item number 100 on our list. But next up, we have an often underutilized and overlooked item, the Wand of Enemy Detection. This rare attunable item is very simple in what it does. It tells you if there's an enemy nearby and what direction it is. Now, it doesn't tell you the distance of a harmful enemy, but this particular item is useful inside of combat, outside of combat, in a dungeon, in an open field. No matter what, you're gonna want to have this particular item. It detects visible or non-visible enemies for up to a minute, which is a long period of time. And actually, this item is a great thing to break out for roleplay heavy parties, because breaking this out at like a masquerade ball or a big political banquet provides some great moments of tension and roleplay. Because whoever has this item will know that there is an enemy nearby. They'll know the general direction, but not exactly what the enemy is. And of course, when you're combing through a dungeon, this particular item helps you find where the bad guys are. But also, if your party is a bit lost, and they've cleared out all the other enemies in the dungeon, except for the boss monster, then this item will point them in the direction where they generally need to go. Trust me, it happens far more often than you'd think. Is this a game-breaking magic item? No, not by any means. Is it always useful to have in a party? Absolutely. As I've DM'd more and more games for new players, this is one of the first items I like to give them. But moving on from this one, now we're going to item number 98, the Headband of Intellect. This is a simple magic item overall. It just sets your intelligence score to 19 once you attune to it. Now, intelligence is an often dumped stat in D&D 5th edition, mainly because it doesn't do a whole lot for you except for ability checks. Mainly, you just have a character like a wizard who's pumping intelligence. However, that's not to say that intelligence checks are meaningless by any means. I know in my campaigns, things like arcana checks, history checks, nature checks, investigation checks come up all the time. And there is inherent power at just simply setting an ability score to 19. It also is a huge benefit to subclasses like an Eldritch Knight. And honestly, if you are a DM that gives intelligence extra boosts, like you know an extra language or have an extra proficiency depending on your intelligence modifier, I think that the Headband of Intellect would probably jump about 50 or 60 spots instantly if you were in a game like that. We should not underestimate getting a 19 in any ability score. It's very, very powerful. Just the one problem is that we really need more things we can do with our intelligence score on a game-to-game basis. And because of that, the Headband of Intellect comes in at spot 98 on this list. Now, the next item is so simple that even someone with 1 intelligence could use it. At 97 is the Ever-Smoking Bottle, an uncommon item that is basically a smoke bomb, but of course reusable. So as an action, you open up this bottle. Within a 60-foot radius, this heavily obscuring smoke appears. Then for each minute the bottle remains open, the radius increases by another 10 feet, up to a maximum of 120 feet. However, a 60-foot radius of instantly obscured area is extremely powerful. It's great for a party trying to make an escape, great if you're taking fire from enemies and want them to have disadvantage when firing at you, Against enemy mages this is great, because spells like Magic Missile, which normally can't miss, only happen if you can see your target. The Ever-Smoking Bottle is a great piece of utility that any rogue, ranger, monk, fighter, etc. should keep inside their bag. This is one of those items that is so simple and limited only by your own creativity. But now we're going to be moving into a more situational item. Well, that is depending on your playstyle, because now coming in at spot 96 is the Ring of Feather Falling. This rare magic item allows you to gently descend 60 feet per round and not take any fall damage. Now it's kind of up to you how often you're going to be using this Ring of Feather Falling, and also kind of up to your DM. If you're constantly fighting in these flat plains, then you're not going to get much use out of it. If every village you walk into has a maximum height of 2 stories, probably not going to get the most use out of that. However, if you're constantly trekking through mountains or in this urban style fantasy campaign with skyscrapers arcing up towards the night sky, then the Ring of Feather Falling is going to be your best friend. The number of daring, unique, creative maneuvers you can pull off without fearing fall damage is immense. Players with this ring love jumping out of windows, falling off of cliffs, and generally doing death-defying stunts without basically any consequences. The more chaotic and daring a player, the more the Ring of Feather Falling is going to make you happy. And with such a narrow scope, it's never going to break your game. And honestly, no matter who you are, when you need the Ring of Feather Falling as you're falling off a cliff, you're going to be glad that you had this item. So because of all that, the Ring of Feather Falling is sitting comfortably at spot 96. And coming up next at spot 95 is a pair of boots that any stealthy character would love to have. These, of course, are the uncommon Boots of Elvenkind. These stylish boots give any character advantage on stealth checks that require silent movement. And straight up, I think every D&D character can remember a situation when they had to silently sneak past a group of guards. The Boots of Elvenkind allow any character to do this because they do not require attunement, so that means you can put this on your plate armor carrying fighter and take away that disadvantage that they usually have, or give it to your normal rogue and have their stealth go higher and higher and higher. I'm really putting a lot of value here on the versatility and the amount of characters that the Boots of Elvenkind can work for. Because again, quite literally, every single character would want the Boots of Elvenkind. No character is hurt by having the boots, and you're not losing out on an attunement slot. So if you're ever in a situation and you have the chance to buy the Boots of Elvenkind, or you are a DM and are just trying to figure out that small but powerful magic item to give to your players, the Boots of Elvenkind is a great choice. And now moving on to spot 94, we have the Eyes of the Eagle. This uncommon magic item boosts one of the most often used skills in all of Dungeons & Dragons, the perception skill. How often every session are you making perception checks? For most D&D players, it's pretty much every single session. And even if you aren't the quote-unquote wisdom character of the party with a super high perception, you are still going to be in situations where you're going to have to make a perception check. Say if you're on watch, or you're trying to spot an enemy that's sneaking up on you. For a low-level character, the Eyes of the Eagle are extremely powerful. The only thing that's really holding it back is that it consumes an entire attunement slot. However, there are still many high-level characters that would burn that attunement slot so that they could have advantage on all their perception checks. At least the perception checks that involve sight, but who are we kidding? That's most of them. And now moving on to slot 93, we have the +3 ammunition, and spoiler alert, this is the only ammunition on the list. And this is why I don't think of ammunition that highly. It's because this magical ammunition, at least in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, is one use only. I suppose it would be a little bit different if you could reuse those +3 arrows. Heck, it would be different if you could reuse those +1 arrows. I would actually enjoy that a lot as a DM, but the ammunition is one use only, and so that leads to an interesting scenario where you kind of have to force the players to keep track of their ammunition. Now some players are really good about this, while others slack off. And then when they should have had only 3 shots at +3, now they've taken 10 at +3, and the entire battle is kind of screwed up a little bit. And again, that's not to mention that they are only one use and a very rare item. Gold is a precious and valuable resource. Are you really going to be spending it all on ammunition? For all of the magic items ahead, my thought process is, would I rather have 10 plus 3 arrows or this magic item. And again, 10 plus 3 arrows can be a huge swing throughout large portions of the campaign. And definitely, if you can get magical ammunition, why not use it in your games? A plus 3 to hit and to damage is incredibly powerful, but it's its single use that limits ammunition to at most spot 93 on this list. And coming up just ahead of ammunition at spot 92 is the Potion of Vitality. And after I just got finished talking about ammunition and how I don't like its limited use, why am I putting a potion above it? Well, it's because the Potion of Vitality is so darn good. Firstly, the ability to remove any exhaustion you are suffering from is such a huge benefit. Exhaustion is debilitating in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And this is the only potion that you can buy that removes it. Not only does it remove it, it removes all that exhaustion. It also cures any disease or poison affecting you. Now, admittedly, this can usually be cured if there's a paladin in the party, but if you don't have a party with a paladin, this potion is extremely valuable. In addition, for 24 hours afterward, you regain the maximum number of hit points when you spend a hit die. For tough dungeons, a Potion of Vitality is indispensable. If you have a long, grueling march where your party builds up 2, 3, 4 levels of exhaustion, a Potion of Vitality can be a lifesaver. I considered very few potions to actually be on this list, but I knew without a doubt the Potion of Vitality needed to be here. And that's why it sits at spot 92 on this list. And finally, we have at spot 91 the Amulet of the Plains. This particular item, with a successful intelligence check, will allow you to cast Plane Shift. And even on a failed save, you still have a 60% chance of traveling to the plane you wanted to go to, just a little bit off target. If you ever need to hop between planes, this amulet is one of the best options. Sure, if you don't have a high intelligence, it can be a bit risky. However, there is actually no limit to the amount of times you can use this amulet in a row, so if you fail the intelligence check, and even if you're shunted to a completely different plane of existence, you can keep on remaking that intelligence check until you succeed and you get to the actual plane you want to go to. Or if you go to a random spot on the plane, you just trek to where you originally wanted to end up. Whatever you roll, the Amulet of Plains actually doesn't have that bad of a downside. Maybe you spend a minute hopping back and forth between planes before you get to that exact right place you want to go to, but otherwise it's just a very fun magic item. Now, it can be a little bit of a nightmare for a DM that doesn't have a ton of other planes ready, so if you give this item out as a DM, you need to write down a few random locations that a party can go to. Just have 4 other planes in the tank and 2 or 3 locations each that the party can pop up into. It can be a fun little side quest. Perhaps the party jumps into the equivalent of the Salem witch trials in Gehenna. Maybe there's a feast going on in Arborea. Or maybe they've ended up in a very weird layer of the abyss. All of these things are possible with the Amulet of the Plains, and it allows for the story to move forward. It's an item that's both super useful and zany. It brings out all the best qualities of Dungeons & Dragons. And at the price of just an attunement slot, I could not think of putting any other item here except for the Amulet of the Plains. Now, if you like this video and want to continue seeing more of this series, I encourage you to subscribe. And I'd also encourage you to watch this video right here. It has more of the same type of content that you'll love. And thank you for entering the dungeon.